Hope you're having a great morning. You can cut that out, Charlie. So this is gonna be kind of impromptu. I have done dialogue dives for like a dozen different TV shows or movies in the past on my main channel. But one of the things that I thought would be interesting today, since I have the second channel and I have some better recording equipment, would be to do a dialogue dive for a video game. And today what I wanted to do was see how you guys should receive this, how it would work, by going over the writing of God of War Ragnarok. Now, God of War Ragnarok, to me, is one of the best games ever made. It is truly a masterpiece, not just from the gameplay perspective, which is amazing, but also from the writing. And I think one of the aspects of writing that people can most learn from is the scene where Thor is first introduced into the narrative, where he meets Kratos and Atreus. I am a script and novel editor. I'll put my links to my websites and my Patreon and whatnot down below if you want to look me up for my services, if you find this kind of stuff interesting. And what I'm going to do today basically is watch the video with you guys, and kind of like a react channel, but I hope with a little more meat and potatoes, walk you guys through some of the narrative techniques and processes that are being used within, because some of them obviously I think will be pretty easy to see, and then others might be a bit more high level that might go by the wayside. So if you guys are aspiring writers, or if you just like video games and God of War and writing like that, hopefully you will enjoy this.
What was that? The ball.
All right, this is already great. If you were playing through the game instead of watching it on YouTube, you would understand that this hammer signals Thor, and the entire last events of the game were battling against Balder. And so obviously now we have Thor here, and you've battled his sons before, and the very start of this game is Thor, possibly, aside from Odin, the most famous of the Norse gods, coming down, standing in front of you, destroying your house, all the little pieces before, making you think there's going to be this initial conflict. And you think that too, because in the previous game, if I can show a clip of this, we got into a fight with Balder. So of course, we are going to think through writing that it's going to be parallel. We're going to fight Thor here just as we fought Balder. And this is what I mean by some of the subtleties in writing, because as you're going to see, things don't necessarily go like that smoothly and according to plan.
Can I come in?
Perfect. This is already a great subversion. There are plenty of things happening here, and in a lot of fictions, most notably what comes to mind for me is Inglourious Basterds, where you're going to have an antagonist who is closely occupying the space of a protagonist, but still in a very menacing, villainous way, right? So in Inglourious Basterds, it was Hans Landa having his, I believe it was lunch with Shoshana, I believe was the character's name, forgive me if I'm wrong, and it was incredibly tense the entire time. And the entire thing, as far as like the writing perspective, is about the subtext of the scene, because you have a villain who, instead of being overtly antagonistic, is being covertly antagonistic, right? It's the pretense of civility, of you having to basically let your guard down because of what they want, while still more or less being at their mercy because of the threat of violence that they present, right? And of course, we're not only dealing with that. This is a fantastic shot that I've stopped on, because in the original game, Kratos was bigger than Balder, like significantly bigger than Balder. And if we think about parallelism, which again is setting two pieces of fiction or two aspects of fiction side by side so we can compare them, now this honestly kind of works as a foil to the first part, where again, we fought Balder immediately when he came to the door, and Kratos was bigger than Balder. Thor towers over Kratos, which is insane because Kratos is already like a huge guy. So again, right off the bat, a lot of cool stuff happening with the writing, and there's probably only gonna be more. There's something really cool here too. Aside from that awesome slam on the table, look at the framing. And again, I think this really does come down to writing as well. Like if you're writing anything, whether it's on paper, whether it's meant to be something that's visual, always be thinking of the three-dimensional space that your characters occupy, because it can be used for storytelling as well. What I'm talking about here is this. Now, if you know anything about the game going forward, eventually, Atreus will go off to Odin and Thor in Asgard. And the entire midsection of the game is about Atreus's loyalty between Kratos and his investigations into his identity with Thor and Odin, right? So he's being pulled from one way to the other. And that's kind of like a huge thematic moment for Atreus, because he also knows he's Loki, which would be kind of like his Norse name. And here we have him in between Thor and Kratos. I would be incredibly surprised if this was not purposeful. Just the framing, right? I'm certain somewhere in the creation of this, the makers of the scene, the people who put all this together, the story writers, purposely did this, because even if it's for a split moment, it allows for us to be able to see him in between these two forces that again will become more prevalent in the midsection of the narrative.
You know who I am? Back before winter set in, there were some misunderstandings. Regrettable ones. But I think we all have a better idea of who we're dealing with. Now, what you did to his boys, self-defense.
Odin, I am not as gung-ho on like thinking Odin is the super, you know, like a epitome of video game villains as some other people are, but be that even as it is, he's a fantastic character. And again, there's so much subversion going on. He walks in and look at his first line of dialogue. Let's look at that, the scowl, the immediate use of magic, the realization that he's been there the whole time.
You know who I am?
It's just so good. You know who I am. Maybe this wasn't intentional, but maybe it was. But a large part about deific representation in fiction and godhood in fiction is the presentation of gods as almost like innately part of both the human and natural experience, but like above them, right? It's this idea that humans exist to be able to give deference to gods, right? This is a huge thing in like Greek mythology, right? Like they lived to worship the gods and the aspects that they use, right? So drinking to Dionysus, praying to the sea for Poseidon. In the Hebrew and Christian religions, I am is what Jehovah says to his believers, right? And so Odin saying like, you know who I am. He's not asking a question. He's making a declaration that he is so great and powerful that like he just comes in, doesn't even introduce himself by name. Obviously the subtitles do, so like, you know, we don't have to wonder. But him just coming in, never having met Kratos or Atreus before, and him just saying, you know who I am, harkens back to not only kind of like classical ways of representing deities and gods, but also it's just a really cool freaking entrance for your villain to make, because it denotes such power and authority. I really love it. So this is really cool as well. One of the things that really, really good, competent writers can do is target two separate audiences at once, with one single usage of writing. So God of War Ragnarok obviously is a sequel. And no matter how strange it might be to people who play video games, or people who even just interact with media with multiple entries, some people will just jump into a sequel before playing the first game. Now, most people won't. That's not going to be most people's experiences, but they're going to do it. Now, what does that mean? That means those people, even the select small group, let's just say it's 10%. Even if it's 10%, let's just say the game sells, I don't know, 1 million, which is kind of low, I think. But if it sells 1 million and you have 10% of that, what is that, like 100,000? 100,000 people are not going to know the events of the previous game. And what he just said allowed those people to have proper context and understanding for the events happening here, right? But it also was just fluid, organic dialogue that seemed right. It didn't seem like he was pandering to those people or people who didn't know, but he just pretty much gave a concise, kind of like just wrap up of the conflict happening between the Aesir gods and Kratos and Atreus, right? He killed Thor's sons. That was not great, but the real problem was he killed Baldur, which was, again, the conflict of the last game. And because of that, everybody is now caught up, right? It's this, I appreciate it so much, being able to make sure that nobody is left out, writing for as many audiences as possible while still seeming like you're only writing for one. Really cool little detail, and I think it gives power for more people to be able to appreciate the scene and, of course, what eventually is going to happen. And that's a really cool moment too. Him taking Kratos's his drink, even if it's undrunk, it's in his own home. That is a sign of disrespect. No matter how nice Odin is, that is a sign of disrespect, and it underlines everything that will eventually be their relationship going forward.
How about peace? How does peace strike the esteemed, retired god of war? How about we just don't kill each other? How about you stay home, kick up your feet, seek no quarrel with me, and I'll have none with you.
Again, very cool subversion. I'm thinking that there was going to be some type of horrific, bloodbath fight type thing. And again, wait a little bit. But having the main antagonist approach you with an offer of peace right off the bat, is, again, something that you just don't see a lot in writing. And you wonder, like, what's the play here? What's the reason Odin, the king of the Aesir, would come offer peace? Because it's completely is a left turn from how the scene had set up pretty much all the expectation on the viewer. And it's the mark of, I think, good, confident writing as well.
Of course, it means that one has to stop his search for Tyr.
Yeah. We know what you've been up to. Stop it.
Tyr's old ways are dead. He is dead. You understand? And then that's it. Then we're square. Shit, I'll even sweeten the deal. I'll let you keep the prisoner that I know you stole.
This is insane. Like, watching this back over again and realizing, and hopefully I'll be able to show some clips of this as well. So, they know Loki is looking for Tyr, right? Actually, I'll back up just a little bit. When antagonists make demands of a character, or pretty much any character makes demands of another character, they are innately displaying their vulnerabilities. If Odin is coming in here being like, don't do this thing, don't look for Tyr, we as the audience can automatically understand he is either fearful of what Tyr can do or fearful of what Tyr represents. Whether or not you mean to communicate that message, anytime you put forth a demand for someone to cease or desist or stop something, or any goal that you have, the inverse can usually be inferred, right? What's insane here is that the writers know this, and Odin knows this. He knows that more likely than not, there's not going to be any peace treaty between Kratos and Atreus. They're going to refuse him. And because he has divulged his vulnerability, they're going to be more gung-ho about finding Tyr. And again, he knows this. So what he has done later on is transform himself into Tyr, right? So that he could join their group and have inside information about what they're doing against him. So this whole initial part was a ruse just so that he could get closer to Kratos and Atreus without them knowing, because he gave them a vulnerability that they didn't know he was already planning, just so that he could have a one-up on them. This is what I'm talking about as far as like a display and a showing of a character's traits, rather than being like, oh, a character is smart. Showing possibly means that someone won't appreciate it. Someone might not get it until a second watch, but it's upon seeing the information, like understanding the evidence of what a character is, that you can really start to go like, oh my gosh, this is true to how like a real person might act, right? I'm not being treated like an outside viewer. And it makes it so that the fiction itself becomes more alive. And I think that's really, really cool.
That's right. I know you're in here somewhere, you silver-tongued little shit.
Also, one more quick thing. Having him constantly know things that the group doing, that Kratos and Atreus and Mimir is doing, that's an age-old trick done by writers to make the antagonist seem incredibly threatening. Because if the antagonist knows your every move, it makes the chess match against them to overcome them to get your goal seem that much more difficult, right? Again, not every antagonist does this, but when you have like a master manipulator schemer, they're usually going to come into a scene having demonstrated some type of like deep knowledge of you. The inverse of this is done in Death Note, funny enough, in I think it's like the second episode. Well, even though Light is the protagonist, technically he's still the villain, and L comes in with a wealth of knowledge on Light because of basically his deductions on what Light has done. If people get that reference, some people don't watch anime, I understand that, but keep in mind that's why Odin here knows, even when Kratos doesn't, that Atreus was looking for Tyr and that they have Mimir.
Why should we believe a word of you? What have your promises ever been worth?
There he is, my old partner in crime.
He's lost weight.
If he tells you snow is white, he's lying.
What kind of wisdom is that? Can't the smartest head alive see past himself? See that we all want the same thing? All right. Here's a deal I know you can trust. I'll settle your debt with my ex. Keep Freya off your back. Keep your boy safe. That's really all you want, isn't it?
Here, I think is a really cool part of the scene, and we're coming up towards the end of it. Usually, a scene will have a scene with an antagonist, especially the introduction of an antagonist, will have the antagonist perform some action that signifies why they're the antagonist. And it'll be some horrible thing that they will do upon their introduction. Again, I made a video about this on the first, or my initial channel, the main one. And the reason that is done is to be able to impress upon you as the viewer, this is why I should take this person seriously, and this is why I should dislike them, right? And effectively what it does, it puts the protagonist on the high moral ground, so we maintain likability with them, and then it puts the antagonist on a low moral ground, so we know to dislike them. What's happening here is so cool, because everything Odin is saying, of course, is BS and lies. But to a first-time player, he's the one in the moral high ground. He's the one offering peace. He's the one saying that he'll protect Kratos and Atreus against Freya. He doesn't even want anything in return. He just wants there to not be bloodshed. And again, because the game is purposely trying to put us in a place of trusting Odin, because of obviously what needs to happen in the midsection with Atreus going to him and training with him and whatnot, we have to believe that he has a good heart, or at least non-evil intentions. And so by having him here offering peace, and then having our main characters deny it, he gets to be set up as a reasonable person that we could possibly understand and side with. so we can mirror whatever Atreus is doing later on. It works very well, and it possibly was really the only route they could go, and I'm happy that they executed it so nicely.
So what do you say?
Hello.
That will never not be old. I love Kratos so much. Borderline perfect character. That whole spiel, and he just goes, no. Perfect.
Don't take all day.
About time.
And that's where I think we'll stop, because I'm not going to go over the whole fight scene. But the whole scene, especially the ending with Odin not even being angry but just disappointed, and Thor not even really seeming to be that excited, I think is a beautiful send-off. And of course, now we get put into our action. This is our aside from even just the scene of dialogue, this is the hook, right? You know, this is where we actually get into the mirroring of the Baldur fight, which I think is really cool, because a game needs to start off, especially if it's a narrative and action-based game, with demonstrations of how it accomplishes both, right? So we got the narrative, and then now we get the action. I absolutely love God of War Ragnarok and just video games as a whole. And being able to tell stories like this. The reason I can do this type of content is because you can talk about video games and use video game footage as much as you want. Can't do the same thing with TV shows and movies, even though I'd like to. So again, if there's any other video game content that you guys think that you'd want to have me look at or break down in real time, let me know. If you guys want to hire me on for anything, if you guys want to have me look at your stuff, have me talk to you about your material, check out my link below. I'll put that in the description. I usually have some great times with clients, and I'm very lucky to be able to do what I do. But if you enjoy, subscribe, like, head over to my Patreon, help me out, or check out my website for my books. And I will talk to you all again soon. I had a great time, so see ya.